highly anticipated Indian Wells third-round match between Coco Gauff and Eala ended in disappointing, really heartbreaking fashion as Coco retired down 2-6 Love 2 due to a left arm injury. Gauff won their previous match a couple weeks ago in the Dubai quarterfinals, only dropping 2 games. It was 6-Love, 6-2. This match, of course, was very different. Coco didn't hold serve one time in the match. She had 4 game points at 2-1, and she had a 40-love lead at 2-3, but couldn't get over the finish line due to double faults or just errant forehands. Gauff, who finished the match with 7 double faults, noticeably went for a lot more on her second serve in this match, hitting it with an average speed of 98 miles per hour at one point.
The match ended. Coco Gauff walked to the net, retired from the game, and exchanged a few quiet words with Eala. Nobody in that stadium heard what was said, but Gauff just told the world exactly what happened at that net. And it says more about both of these players than any scoreline ever could. Now that you know what Eala said to Gauff at the net and everything Gauff said about her afterward, does this change how you see their rivalry going forward? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. Let's get straight into it.
That'll probably do it, yeah. Well, that stinks. 2 of the game's brightest stars. You hear Coco Gauff apologizing. There's no need for that.
My arm is like going like this the whole time, so I'm sorry.
An apologetic Coco Gauff. That just speaks to her class. She is a one of one.
Coco Gauff sat down in her post-match press conference at Indian Wells, and someone asked her the question everyone watching had been wondering about: what did Eala actually say to her when they met at the net after the retirement, because there was clearly a moment there. Both players looked like they felt the weight of how the match ended. Gauff looked regretful. Eala looked concerned, and they stood there for a few seconds and spoke before going their separate ways. Gauff's answer was simple. She said Iga told her she hoped she felt better. Things like that. Short, genuine, human. No drama, no performance, just one competitor checking on another in a moment that had nothing to do with rankings or trophies. And that answer, that tiny quiet exchange at the net, somehow says more about Eala than any of the stats from the match do. Because it's easy to be gracious when you lose. It is a completely different thing to be genuinely kind when you win, especially when you've been waiting 2 weeks to get revenge on the person who just beat you 6-0 in a previous match. But let's back up and put the full picture together, because there's a lot happening here and all of it is worth unpacking properly. 2 weeks before Indian Wells, these same 2 players faced each other at the Dubai Tennis Championships. Gauff beat Eala 6-0, 6-2. That scoreline is not a close match. That is a shutout. That is the kind of result that gets circulated on social media with comments about how big the gap still is between Eala and the top players in the world. And look, those comments weren't entirely wrong in that moment. Gauff was the better player that day. She was dominant. She controlled every aspect of the match, and Eala simply could not find a way in. So when the draw at Indian Wells put them together again, most people expected a similar story. Same players, same result. That's usually how it works when the gap in quality is that wide. But Iga apparently had different plans. She came back to Indian Wells with a completely different approach. In her own post-match interview, she talked about taking the learnings from Dubai and doing things differently, being more aggressive, keeping her focus sharper, playing with more intensity in her legs, in her movement, in how she controlled the tempo of rallies. And it worked immediately. From the very first set, Gauff looked like she was facing a different opponent entirely. The stats tell the story clearly. Eala made 68% of her first serves. She won 59% of points on that first serve. She created 6 breakpoint opportunities and converted 5 of them against the world number 4 against a 2-time Grand Slam champion. Those numbers are not lucky. Those are the numbers of a player who came in with a game plan, executed it, and made her opponent uncomfortable from the very first game. Gauff, meanwhile, was managing something physically from early in the first set. She called the trainer during the match and received treatment on her left shoulder and arm. Her first serve percentage dropped to 44%. She committed 7 double faults in the first set alone. By the time the second set started and she lost her serve in the second game, the decision to retire wasn't a surprise anymore. The only question was when it would come, not if. But here's what Gauff said in her press conference that actually matters most, and it's the part that didn't get nearly as much attention as it deserved. She said she felt really bad about pulling out. She said, "You never want to retire from a match." And then she added something specific. She said she felt worse about it because of how well Eala was playing. She said she didn't want to take anything away from the way Eala was performing. Read that again. The player who just had to retire from a match, who was in physical pain, who was dealing with an injury that made it impossible to continue. Her first concern in the press conference was making sure the credit went to her opponent. That is a remarkable thing to say, and it means something coming from a player of Gauff's stature because she didn't have to say it. She could have just talked about the injury, expressed disappointment, and moved on. Instead, she made it a point to tell the world that Eala was playing great tennis, and deserved full recognition for it. She also said something that revealed exactly how much respect she has for Eala as a competitor. She said she would rather have finished the match and lost 6-0 than retire. Think about what that means for a second. The world number 4, a Grand Slam champion, would have preferred to take a complete beating on Stadium 1 at Indian Wells than walk off and leave the match unfinished. That's competitive pride. And the fact that she framed it in terms of not wanting to shortchange Eala's performance makes it even more significant. And then, almost as an aside, she added, "I think she's going to have a great tournament." Coming from Coco Gauff, that's not a throwaway line. That's a prediction from someone who just spent the better part of an hour on the same court as Eala and saw firsthand what she's capable of when everything is clicking. When the world number 4 says she thinks you're going to have a great tournament, the tennis world pays attention to that. Now, let's talk about the broader context of this rivalry and why it has become one of the most interesting storylines on the women's tour right now. The head-to-head is now 1-1. 2 matches, 2 completely different results. In Dubai, Gauff was the superior player from start to finish. In Indian Wells, before the retirement, Eala was so dominant that the match looked like it was heading toward an even more lopsided final score than Dubai, just in the opposite direction. That kind of swing tells you that neither player has completely figured the other one out yet, which means every future meeting between them is going to be genuinely unpredictable. And that's exactly the kind of rivalry women's tennis needs right now. Not just the established dynamic between the top 5 players who all know each other's games inside out, but a rising challenger who can walk onto the court 2 weeks after getting crushed and produce one of the most dominant performances of the current season. That narrative is compelling, and both players have the personality and the game to make it last. Gauff, for her part, has been consistently generous in how she talks about Eala. Back in Dubai, after winning convincingly, she specifically thanked Eala for bringing new fans to the sport. She talked about how Filipino supporters had turned the Dubai venue into something resembling a home crowd and called it great for tennis. She said she sees why people root for Eala and that she roots for her too when they're not playing each other. That kind of public generosity from an established star toward a rising impact on the sport. And given that Gauff has a massive following and a major voice in tennis conversations globally, that support has real value for how Eala is perceived by fans who might not have been following her closely yet. From Eala's side, the respect is equally genuine. In her press conference after the Indian Wells match, she talked about Gauff being a great player who will always give you a hard time. She talked about not being able to control how well your opponent plays and focusing only on what she could control herself. She didn't celebrate the retirement. She didn't use it as an opportunity to make a bigger moment out of the win than it was. She acknowledged the circumstances, expressed genuine concern for Gauff's health, and focused on her own performance as the takeaway from the match. And what a performance it was, injury or not. You don't go 6-2 and break someone's serve 5 times by accident. You don't maintain a 68% first serve percentage against a top 5 player by getting lucky. The foundation of that win was real. The execution was real. And Gauff made sure to say so publicly, which closes the loop on any narrative that tries to diminish what Eala did on that court. The round of 16 match against Linda Noskova is next. Noskova is powerful, hits the ball hard and has enough experience at this level to be genuinely dangerous. She is not going to make things easy, but Eala goes into that match with something that is very difficult to manufacture. Momentum built on genuine confidence, not just results. The kind of confidence that comes from walking onto the biggest court at one of the biggest tournaments in the world and outplaying a Grand Slam champion so thoroughly that even the champion goes out of her way to credit your performance in her own press conference. That is where Eala is right now. 20 years old, ranked 31st in the world and climbing in the round of 16 at Indian Wells for the first time in her career, with Coco Gauff telling the world she thinks the tournament is about to get a lot more interesting. The whisper at the net was simple. "Get well soon." Things like that. Nothing dramatic, nothing designed for the cameras. Just two people who respect each other in a moment that neither of them wanted to end the way it did, being decent human beings. But that small moment at the net is actually the whole story. It tells you who I is when nobody is writing about her. It tells you who Gauff is when the match is already over and she has nothing left to prove. And it tells you that this rivalry, however it plays out over the next few years, is going to be worth watching closely, because the tennis is great, but the people playing it are even better. Coco Gauff didn't just reveal what Eala said at the net. She told the world exactly how she sees this rivalry and where she thinks it's going. And honestly, it's hard to argue with her. If you want to follow every chapter of this story as it unfolds, hit like and subscribe. This one is far from